And we're not live. Okay, so the goals for today are to install Arch in KVM here. I have it set up for UEFI. Install Steam, and then get a game running. Now, obviously, I'm not going to be passing through my GPU or anything at this point. This is just a test. So let's get started. So we're in the live environment here, and it's a lot easier to type these commands in by pasting them in to an Alacrity terminal. So we're going to set up root password so we can SSH in here, and then okay, so now we're SSH'd into our VM, and the first step will be to update time, date, locale, all that jazz. You can update your mirrors, but the US ones will work fine for me, and this command hasn't been working lately. So I'm going to move on to setting up the disks. And what we're going to do is use Btrfs with Snapper and Snapper Grub. I already know that my disk is VDA. It's the only virtual disk here. On hardware, it'll probably be SDA, B, etc. So we'll use gdisk here. Create a new partition, and the first one is going to be our EFI partition. So default number, default first sector, and we'll make it a size of 512 megabytes. And the hex code I already know is EF00, but if you're curious, you can type in L, hit enter, and then go through the hex codes. We're looking for EFI, so right here, EF00, EFI system partition, and then we will do EF00. Our next partition is going to be a swap. Actually, I'm just going to skip that for now for the VM. So we'll go right to the Btrfs partition. Keep that first sector's fine. Last sector, we're going to use up the whole remainder. And 8300 Linux file system is also fine. There, W to write, and we will proceed. Okay, so now we actually have to set up the file systems themselves here. So the first one is going to be our EFI, which has to be a FAT32. So we've skipped the swap, so we won't be doing swap on. And the second partition is going to be our Btrfs partition. Go. And then we will mount that Btrfs partition and then create. So here we're creating our subvolumes for the snapper. All of this information is on the Arch Wiki. If you want details on exactly what's going on. So we've unmounted the file system, and now we're going to remount them individually here. And these are all the subvolume directories here. And then we'll mount all of our subvolumes into those directories. Now I have to change it to VDA2 because we didn't do the swap. But otherwise, if you have a swap, VDA fine or SDA 3 would be fine. And then here we're going to mount our boot. Or we're not. So if we check our disks now, we should see the boot mounted and all of our subvolumes here. So VDA1 has our boot, VDA2 has our log, snapshots, home, and root. Okay, packstrap will add in our base packages here. So we're adding base development. I've chosen to go with Linux Zen, and obviously the Linux Zen headers. And because I'm using Linux Zen, there will be some other changes than a normal Arch install further down. The packstrap has succeeded here, so we need to generate our fstab. So this will mount all of our drives on boot for us. And there's a handy command for doing so. Next up, we'll actually enter the system using archtroot. And then from here, we are actually modifying the system itself. So if you're looking for a specific time zone, you can search and grep for your local area. However, I already know that I'm searching for America, Toronto. So we'll put that into our local time. Update the hardware clock. And then we need to update and/or create all of our locale files. So here I'm going to uncomment the English. English CA UTF-8, and then also English US UTF-8. Close that out. And then we'll generate our locale. Again, reflector hasn't been working lately. We'll try it one more time. Yeah, it seems I'll need to troubleshoot that, but for now we'll just carry on. Alright, I've already done that. Good. Okay. So now we set up the network information. Your host name. In my case, I'll just do LTT Daily Driver Challenge. And then we'll set up our host file. So that's obviously the host name that we had picked earlier. Oh, and we need to set a root password so that we can SSH in after reboot. Do something quick. Okay, so now we're going to install extra packages. You know what? So these packages have a lot of extra options here. So if you need printing support, Bluetooth support we won't be needing. Wi-Fi we won't be using. Everything. Reflector was already installed using Packstrap. Should be good. Okay, next we'll be getting set up for ButterFS. Now, I don't know whether or not it's better to put ButterFS in modules or binaries. I've seen both, but I haven't had any problems with putting it in modules. So we'll be putting it here for now. And then we will make, obviously for Linux Zen, because those were the headers I picked, and the kernel. Okay, now we'll set up Grub. And Grub is what will boot your system on startup. And we're actually setting it up in order to also be able to boot snapshots. Next, we'll enable the network manager and the SSHD daemon, or the SSH daemon. This will allow us to SSH in once we reboot into the system. And we'll create a user, add the user to these groups. It may not be necessary, but I think there is a pulse audio issue with multiple X server outputs. So for now, we'll just add the user to those, set a password. Here we're going to edit the sudo permissions for the wheel group. So wheel all equals all. This wheel all. This one. So now we back out of the arch root, unmount everything, and reboot that system. So now when it boots up, we should see it boot up into our actual Arch distro. Yeah, and we can see the host name there. So now we should be able to should be able to log in here. And then okay, we've logged into the actual OS here, and obviously it was no desktop environment installed, so we're just in a TTY. So let's fix that. Actually, shortly we'll set up our snapshots here. So first we have to unmount our snapshot directory, our subvolume, delete the directory, and then rebuild it with the right permissions in order to be able to use the GUI manager. So the mount all will remount our subvolume, and then what we're going to do is modify the permissions, and change the ownership of it. So this should allow us to manage the snapshots without being root. And then Snapper itself will modify those settings. So this is so the allow users, we're going to add our username. We could just add the wheel group if it was a multi-user system. Mine is not, and I forgot the rest. So hourly was set to 5, daily 7, and then 0 for the rest. Obviously pick your own values. Okay, and we'll set up the actual timers here, and the cleanup timer. Good. Now you have a choice. So this is for the AUR. We can either use Yay or Paru. I personally prefer Paru, so we'll install Paru. But you will need some sort of access to the AUR, which is the Arch user repositories. Oh. the reason you need to access the AUR is because a lot of gaming packages are only on the AUR, as well as Snap Pack Grub, Snapper GUI. So this is if you don't want to use the command line. Okay, so now we'll install Snap Pack Grub and Snapper GUI to help us visually maintain our snap packages. So this is running in Vim, and the command to exit out of the review is Q, and then you can continue with the installation, import any keys needed, and then confirm. Okay, so that's essentially the base Arch package all set up. Snap packs all enabled running. Next is the more visually appealing section, where we install the desktop environment here. So a lot of this stuff is personal preference. A-rate, this is needed for i3, and I'm using a VM right now, so I will also need that. Obviously a bunch of fonts, Numlock X. I'm using Pulse Audio. There are other options. Fish, so I'll be using Fish for my shell. And I'll be using Fe for my background selection, Thunar, my file manager, Alacrity as my terminal, and then I'll have a Conky D menu, but I'll be mostly using Rofi for the application selection. So we'll install this. So as you can see at the end here, it is creating our snapshots. So that's good. Now I'm running a VM and I haven't passed through any graphics. So I shouldn't have anything other than, VirtIO. But this will tell you your graphics information. And then from there you can install the relevant graphics drivers. Alright, for the desktop environment, I'm personally going to go with i3. You can go with Plasma, Awesome, there's any option you want. But first you need to install the manager, and I'll be going with LightDM. There's no sudo. And in particular, this Etherclean. And Q to quit. Yes, yes. So that should also install LightDM as well, since it's a dependency. And then we will enable LightDM so that it runs on reboot. Okay, and then now we'll install i3, in particular i3 gaps, to get gaps between the windows. i3 status and i3 blocks, so mostly i3 for all the window bars. Okay. And we'll change the shell for the user. I'm going to use Fish. Shell changed. This will show up on reboot or relogging in. Now we'll set up Pac-Man hooks. So this will tell it when to run snapper. Save that. Normally I would generate a key, add it to the shell, but this is just a VM, so we'll skip that for now. And since i3 comes extremely bare bones, we'll copy in my config files. Cancel that. CD. Okay. So now on Arch, to install Steam, we need to enable the multilib. So we'll edit our Pacman configuration, and then near the bottom here, the multilib. So we'll uncomment multilib and the include. Update Pacman. Now we should be able to install Steam, Wine, and Lutris. Lutris is a game launcher. It's actually incredibly handy. Now this will depend on what graphics card you have. I honestly don't know which one for a VM. I'll try 3. And then again, same thing here, 3, yes. Okay, and the last install here will be Proton and Proton GE Custom. So we should see light DM come up. Yeah. And then obviously we have i3 as our desktop environment. So I've used the defaults for i3. You can see it's pretty empty. So okay, so the mod key for default is Alt. So Alt-D will bring up the D menu here, and then we can open up Thunar. Alt-D, another Thunar. Okay, so what we're going to do is overwrite the config, which has config for everything, and our local. I think this is just for the background, so mostly, and fish. Place everything. Shift 0. Shift E. Exit code. Yes, exit i3. So you can see it's loaded in some of the config files. So the mod key is now the Windows. First things first, we're going to run arander. Close that. Just give it something more sane here. Save it to file. And since this desktop only has the one monitor, we need to modify the i3, which I don't see. new config. There we go. Okay, so then we'll open this with code. -1. Setting them to the same will force all windows to open on this one screen without issue. Let's see. So Windows Shift R in my config to reload, and then we should have so Steam runtime.